And with me now in studio is Adi Kopowitz, and also joining us is Meir Javedanfar, a lecturer at the IDC in Herzliya. Meir, I want to start with you and note another explosion today, just the latest in a series of apparently escalating explosions and mysterious blasts involving power plants, nuclear sites, ships, infrastructure across the country. Meanwhile, we have social protest movements against the government and its handling of the pandemic intensifying. How perhaps could President Hassan Rouhani react?
Well, Jeff, let's add the important fact that the Iranian currency, the rial, has reached an all-time low of approximately 250,000 to $1. I've never seen a situation like this in Iran, never. It has never been this bad. I think Mr. Rouhani is trying to survive by hook and by crook, but to be honest with you, it's not really in his hands. First and foremost, he needs the support of the regime. It's a regime that is in charge of 60% of the economy and not the government. It's the regime that can decide what happens in negotiations with the U.S., which is something that Iran needs. But overall, also, Jeff, the coronavirus issue, which again the regime is responsible, I would say more than the government, is something that at this stage is too big for any Iranian government to handle. I mean, this situation is a crisis of almost biblical proportions if the numbers are true. I mean, Mr. Rouhani said 25 million people. Then, to be honest with you, in the short term, I don't see a way out.
That's a 9,200% increase with the snap of a finger. There has been so much international criticism of Iran for hiding and misrepresenting the true figures, which were 265,000 or so. Now suddenly Rouhani says it's tens of millions, with tens of millions more likely to be infected. I guess why the revelation now, and will it have an impact on the public's anger at the governments for this feeling of being dishonest and deceitful?
Well, Jeff, you mentioned the public anger, and we do remember that after the last time that the Iranian regime publicly lied to its public, there was a lot of public anger. We're talking about, of course, the Ukrainian airplane that was shot down just a few months ago. And perhaps this time the regime is trying to avoid the same kind of public anger, realizing how bad is the crisis all around Iran. And we're talking about both the coronavirus and the economic crisis happening at the same time, with the U.S. sanctions pressuring Iran from the outside. Perhaps the regime realized that the last thing that it needs to add to its plate right now is wide public anger, and this is the reason that Rouhani comes out and says these numbers are the real numbers. Another reason could be trying to maybe show the Iranian public that this really is a significant crisis and their general cooperation is needed for the regime.
I see you agreeing along there, Mayor. I want to ask, though, also, separate from this, national security issues. I mean, we now know, according to multiple reports, Iran's air defenses have been increased and activated. There are growing concerns about these explosions. How does the regional tension, the threat of a military confrontation, perhaps play into this escalating economic and health crisis?
Well, Jeff, do you want me to analyze the situation from the ground up, from the people's view, or from the regime view?
I guess from the regime view, because ultimately they will be the ones determining, really, if this becomes a violent repression here.
Well, the Iranian regime is very much, as far as it sees, it's under attack from the Trump administration. First and foremost, because of the sanctions. They don't say really about who was responsible for these attacks. The Iranian regime usually refers to, these accidents being purely accidents. Some issues regarding Natanz, perhaps the explosion there. But generally, the Iranian regime portrays these things as accidents, and they could be also, Jeff. You got to remember that Iran has been under sanctions for many, many years, and they haven't had, and also corruption. They haven't been maintaining a lot of these infrastructures. But overall, I would say the regime is currently basically trying to survive each day. They are concerned that if they show any flexibility to Trump at the moment, he could use it to win the elections in the U.S., and the Iranian regime does not want the Trump administration to win the U.S. because sanctions will continue.
And then there, from the ground up, I mean, what is the chatter on Telegram and the social media apps?
First and foremost, it's Corona. Second of all, it's the Iranian currency reaching a new record low. People are very, very concerned about this issue. Thirdly, and actually I have to say this is a sweet moment for the people of Iran, there were three demonstrators were going to be executed, young demonstrators from the previous round of demonstrations in Iran. But there was a massive, huge campaign on Twitter calling to stop the executions, and it seems that the regime is now is thinking twice about doing this, which is very important. And last but not least, there have been power outages in Tehran, and with the heat, I think people are going to become even more agitated.
Story we'll stay on top of. Meir Javedanfar and Adi Kopowitz, thank you both so much for being with us as we zoomed into this issue today. Great to have you both.